Hey friends, welcome back to Healedish, the podcast where we talk about the messy, chaotic, sometimes funny, sometimes heartbreaking stories that shape us. I wanted to start off this podcast by telling you guys my full story. I'm going to be sharing some things that I have never shared before, which is honestly saying something as someone who is a chronic oversharer. It can get heavy at times, but I hope that it shows that no matter what has happened to you, healing is always possible. So with that being said, let's jump into part 2. So here is a quick refresher from part 1. So when I was 17 years old, I ended up joining this very culty church out in Redding, California. I had some religious trauma experiences there. It was a lot. So in my 3rd year for Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, I did an internship in Pennsylvania at Georgine and Winnie School called Global Celebration School of Supernatural Ministry. That was not going how I planned. I definitely thought it would be an easier transition, but I was having a lot of just hard things come up. So for example, my first housing fell through. I was asked to write 60 prophetic words based off of just names on a piece of paper. And I was really starting to question my beliefs and feel like I was a fraud because I did not feel like my prophetic gift was real. And I didn't know if I was really hearing from God. And I was also working this late night shift at the diner, and I was working from 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning. And I was just overall very, very exhausted and feeling disheartened at this point. So I had met Ted, who, spoiler alert, I am going to end up marrying. And I didn't think too much of him. He seemed like a very nice guy at the church. Everybody was just singing his praises. So that is all I really knew about Ted at the time. So while all of this chaos is going on, who enters the chat but Will? If you remember, this was my situationship from Norway, and we had remained friends a little bit, despite the fact that he had moved back to Norway. He didn't do a 3rd year through Bethel, and we would Zoom while I was in Harrisburg. And while we were talking, he had mentioned that maybe I could come out to Norway and come and visit him. And at this point, I had also become friends with his sister. So he was saying, you should come out and we should hang out and I'll show you more of Norway, because I'd actually gone to Norway for my 2nd year mission trip, which that is a whole story in and of itself. Maybe I'll do a little mini series about the mission trips I went on, because some were really crazy and I almost got killed, and some were actually kind of just like a vacation, like the Norway mission trip. So he was trying to get me to come out and visit him, but just as friends, because we knew that we were not going to be together. So we had actually even started looking at flights. This was very impulsive. I think we only entertained this idea for maybe 12 hours. And as I was looking at flights, I was just struck with this feeling of, am I really going to plan out this trip with Will where I'm just going to have my heart broken? I know that we're never going to be together, and I'm planning this trip a year out. So essentially I am dedicating myself to this idea that I'm going to go visit my situationship. And at this point, obviously, being raised in these cultures, I think anybody who has been a part of them knows that it is the number one mission to find your husband. Pretty much every room you enter, you are like, are you the one? So at this point, I'm realizing maybe I should not be planning a trip a year out from now with my situationship, because this will just keep me emotionally invested in this fantasy that is never going to be coming true. So at this point, this is where I told Will, actually, this is hurting my heart. I don't think that I should come and visit you. And I think we really just need to have a clean break at this point. So we canceled that. And I started to really think about, what did I want in a spouse? So mind you, I am 20 years old, but this is my hyperfixation at the time. And a lot of this just has to do with the environment. I'm constantly hearing sermons about finding your spouse, and it is top of mind for me. And I'd always wanted to get married young, so it didn't feel strange to me. And honestly, at that point, I had been hoping that I would have already met my person. So I decided, which I have never done this in my life, guys, before. So I don't know why I decided to do this, but I took out my phone and I ended up voice recording this prayer to God. So I ended up saying, God, please send me a spouse, which looking back on this now, I feel like it's so cringe, but I was like, God, please, I promise I'm going to dedicate my life to you. I promise that I am going to serve you forever. I promise to be in ministry, and really try to build your church. Just please send me a spouse that I can help change the world with. I promise I will dedicate my life to this. Please, I'm begging you to send me somebody. And I really started to just get serious about this idea of wanting the search, trying to find the right person. One thing that is crazy is that prayer was on November 25th. So just keep that in your mind. That was November 25th. I just recorded it in my phone. I didn't think much about it anymore after that. So after doing this prayer, I decided that I was going to go to the bookstore, and I ended up buying this book called The Sacred Search. If you know, you know, it is pretty much a book about finding your spouse, written by a Christian man, and he is telling you all of the things that you should be looking for in a partner. So a lot of the book is focused on do not worry about attraction. Do not worry about if you are attracted to the people that you're dating. You should 100% just be focused on the soul of a person, because you guys are going to get old. So what you should really be looking at is, are they going to be a good father? Are they going to lead your family? Which was something I thought I really wanted at the time. And I started to shift my mindset from wanting a romantic relationship to wanting a long-term partnership that was going to honor God. So the reason I say this is, with everything to come, I just want you guys to understand the mindset I was in at the time. I was kind of throwing out all of my personal desires, and I thought that I was just going to be very holy and look for a good guy. Which, hey, that kind of lines up with Ted, or so I thought. So during this time, I was living in that ministry house that I mentioned before, and I was living with two guys and a married couple, and we had the worst luck because when we moved into this house that was on the very bad side of town, we ended up finding out that our heat did not work. And our landlord would not fix this heat. We had called him, texted him, kept trying to get him to fix it, and he refused. So you have to imagine, this is Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, in the middle of winter. At this point, we are in December, so I'm about halfway finished with my internship, and I am so cold in this house. And I am not kidding, guys, when I am telling you that I could see my breath in my bedroom. And it was a very humbling experience because on one hand, I obviously felt like I was suffering. And on the other hand, I felt like, well, if I'm suffering, this must be good. It means that I'm suffering for Christ. I'm really holy right now because I am just going through a lot to try to serve the Lord. But at the same time, I'm freezing. Okay. So I had a little space heater next to my bed, my little air mattress on the floor. And I was falling asleep with 2 or 3 pairs of pants, 5 socks, multiple sweaters, and wearing little gloves at night because I was freezing in this house. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I think I was just hoping at this point that our landlord was going to be a good person and finally fix our heat, which he did not. So I went back to Texas for, let's say, probably a week for Christmas. And when I came back, obviously, fingers crossed, I'm hoping that our heat is fixed. It's not. And pretty much the second I get back, my roommates told me, hey, we are actually all going to move out because this is unlivable. We cannot afford to continue living here. It's not even habitable. So they told me that I had, I believe, 5 days to get out of this house and find somewhere else to live. And at this point, I felt so hopeless because it felt like everything was going wrong. Everything that could go wrong had gone wrong at this point. And I had felt so sure that God had brought me to Harrisburg and that this was going to be a good thing for me. And it just felt like I could not catch a break. So I was at Life Center, which was the church where they were hosting the school. And I was sitting in the lobby. School was going on. All of the students were in the auditorium for school. And I was sitting out there. in the lobby and I called my mom and I started to cry and tell her that I thought that I was going to have to quit my internship and that I was going to have to come home to San Antonio and that I guess I just wasn't going to finish Bethel, which was so disappointing because I felt like I had suffered so much already. I had already sacrificed so much. And all I wanted to do was finish my internship. And to the point, guys, where I was so desperate that I was trying to figure out if it would be possible for me to pitch a tent in my friend's backyard and use her shower if she would let me. And my mom, God bless her, she was like, honey, you will freeze. Okay. Because there was snow outside, but I was just trying to brainstorm any idea of how I could finish this internship. So I'm on the phone with my mom. I end up getting off the phone and I'm just hoping that something is going to work out. And I kid you not, I ended up getting off the phone and Ted came up to me. And at this point, I had not spoken to him too much, just here and there. We had hung out maybe a couple of times in a group. And he came up to me and said, hey, I really hope that this doesn't bother you, but I was listening to your phone conversation with whoever you were talking to. And I heard you say that you might have to not finish your internship and that you didn't have any place to stay. So I took it upon myself to call my friends. They are the Smiths and they have a daughter who is a missionary and she is out of the country right now. She's going to be for the rest of the year and they have a bedroom that is not being used. And I went and I called them. I asked them if you could live there for the rest of the year. And they said that you could live there for free. And would you like to get in my car right now? And we can drive to the Smith's house. You can meet them. You can look at the room. And maybe you can live there and finish your internship for free. And I still get so emotional thinking about it because I burst into tears, guys. I thought that this was God answering my prayer. I thought that Ted, in that moment, I thought that everything that everybody had said about him was so true. I was taken aback by how kind and wonderful he was for going out of his way to do this for someone who's practically a stranger. And in that moment, he felt like my savior. I don't even know how to describe it, but I just felt like God had sent him for me. And not necessarily in a romantic way, but I just really felt like this was all God. So I said, yes, of course, let's go. I hop in his car. I go and meet the Smiths. They say, yes, you can move in. I ended up moving in within a couple days. And from then on out, Ted was everywhere. Okay. I saw him all of the time because they had another daughter who lived there and he was friends with her. So he was constantly at the house and we just really struck a friendship. And what's so crazy is it felt like we had so much history by the time we went on our first date, but all of this really happened in 2 weeks. So I need you guys to picture how quickly my life is really changing and how quickly this friendship with Ted is developing. So we are just really close friends. He's always at the house. There was one night where we had stayed up, just him and I, in the kitchen talking until 2 a.m. And he was telling me about his dreams and he was telling me everything that he wanted to do in ministry, that he wanted to speak at conferences and travel the world, and that he also had this dream of making movies for God and that he wanted to really break into Hollywood. And I thought so highly of him, which is so crazy. We're going to get there, believe me. But I thought so highly of him at this point that I remember I started tearing up and he said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "I just feel so grateful to know you because I know that you are going to change the world." And it felt like, I don't even know how to describe it, guys. It felt like that sentence came from God. Like I truly believed that God was telling me that this man was going to do wonderful things for the kingdom of heaven and that he was so important and wonderful. And I just felt so blessed to know him. So around that time, I started to think, maybe he would be someone that I would want to be the father of my kids. And maybe he is someone who would love me well. Maybe he is what I've been looking for, just his kindness and his selflessness. And I was also starting to hear even more stories about some of the wonderful things that he had done the year previously. So this is crazy, but I had found out that apparently last year there had been a student who had recently gotten divorced and she was fleeing an abusive marriage. And Ted had taken it upon himself to go up to her and on Valentine's Day and say, hey, I know you're grieving and you're going through such a hard time. I was wondering if I could take you out tonight as friends. So not in a romantic way, but he wanted to take her out on Valentine's Day and treat her like a princess, just so that she could understand that she had value during this time. So he takes her out. He gets her all dressed up. And then while they are at dinner, he had people from the ministry come to the table and give her flowers during the dinner just to make her feel special and loved. And I was just constantly being told that this is the type of person that Ted was. He went above and beyond for the people in his life, and he would do anything to make people understand how loved they were by God. So during this time, we are getting closer and closer. And there was one night where there was a snowstorm. So he wasn't able to come over, but we were watching Netflix together. So we had pressed play at the same time, which this is so corny, but we pressed play at the same time and we were watching a movie. And I mentioned to him that I was really hungry and that I really wanted fries. And this is probably midnight in a snowstorm. So I didn't think much of it. And then all of a sudden, I started hearing knocking on the door at the Smiths. I'm like, who the heck would be here this late? And there's a snowstorm and there's so many winter warnings out. And Ted had driven in a snowstorm and brought me fries. And in that moment, I just could not believe how amazing this man was. I thought he was the most romantic, the most kind, most thoughtful person. And it was that night that he ended up asking me out on a date. And I said yes. And I still had some reservations about our age difference. If you remember, I was 20, he was 30. I was not super attracted to him, but I just thought that all of his good qualities outweighed any sort of doubt that I had in my mind about Ted. So we went on our first date and oh my gosh, guys, it was Love Bomb City. He took me to this bookstore. He knew that I loved Chronicles of Narnia. I had a Chronicles of Narnia tattoo. So he took me to this bookstore. He got me The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And he wanted me to tell him how much it meant to me. Like what parts about it really connect to you? And I just felt like he really wanted to know me. He wanted to know what was important to me. And he took me to a vegan restaurant because I was a vegan at the time. And it was this very fancy restaurant. I could tell that he was really trying to impress me. And over dinner, I started to tell him just about my core values and what I cared about as a person. And one thing I told him was that I loved vulnerability. And like I said, I really got this from my first year pastor, or maybe not fully, but it definitely grew that side of me. And I told him, I just love vulnerability when people bare their souls and open their hearts and tell you what they're really thinking and going through. So on the way home from dinner, he looks at me as he's driving and he says, hey, I have somewhere where I want to take you. I was like, okay, where are we going? And it's feeling very Walk to Remember, very romantic and whimsical. And he ended up taking me to the capital of Harrisburg. So while we're at the Capitol, he runs me up the steps and it's really late at night and it's very romantic. And he says, I wanted to bring you here because I had a really deep conversation with my friend here last year. I was going through a really dark time and he really encouraged me. And he said such and such. I won't get into the details, but he shared a very personal story with me. And he said, I just wanted to take you here to tell you more about me because I know how much you value vulnerability and I just wanted to open up to you. And in that moment, I really felt like Ted saw me and that he was an answer to prayer. I don't even know how to describe it, guys, but I really thought that, wow, this is it. This is my person. This is an answer to prayer, somebody who is so kind and good. So we ended up kissing, and then he ended up telling me he was in love with me on our first date, which, oh my gosh, love bomb city. But at the time I was 20 years old and I didn't even know what love bombing was. And all I knew was that I had always wanted somebody to be sure of me. And after everything that I'd been through with Will at Bethel, it just felt like this is exactly what I always wanted. I wanted somebody to be sure of me and not second guess it. So from then on, we jumped in head first. We were together all of the time. I think we started dating on January 31st. That was our anniversary. And from then on out, it was love bomb city. He was showing up at my work with flowers. He was telling everybody that he was in love with me, to the point where it was almost embarrassing. There were times where we would be walking down the street and he would tell people, "Hey, I just want you to know that I love this girl." And it was so embarrassing, but also I had never been doted on that much in my entire life. And obviously it felt a little good, even though I was embarrassed. And there was one time, this was so cringe looking back on, but we were at Buffalo Wild Wings and he stood up in this packed restaurant, made everybody be quiet, and said, "I just want everybody to know that I love this girl." And I am just blushing and so embarrassed, but also I had never felt so fully loved and adored in my entire life. And I didn't feel like I deserved this type of love after everything that I had been through at Bethel. I had felt so dirty and so broken and felt like no man would ever want to be with me. And Ted just seemed to fully accept me for me. And one thing that I also learned at this time early on in our relationship was that he was a virgin. So that didn't really matter to me. I would not have cared if he wasn't a virgin, but I was, I don't know, I was honored that he had waited for me. And obviously I felt a little guilt and shame that I had not waited for him, but he made it clear to me that he didn't care about my past. He only saw me how God saw me. And I just felt so lucky that he seemed to be a complete answer to prayer. In the midst of this incredible love bombing, I will say that there was one red flag that is going to come around again. So please keep this in your head. This comes into some things that I learned about just this year. But while we were dating, I ended up going to his apartment and I saw that there were so many moving boxes in his kitchen. And it just looked like somebody was in the process of moving. And I asked him, "Hey, what's all this stuff?" And he said, "Oh, this stuff is Sarah's stuff." Which, if you remember, Sarah is the girl that he had dated last year. So I asked him, "Oh, when did you guys break up?" And he had told me that they broke up over the summer. So they had been broken up for months at this point. But he said her stuff is here because she's going through a really hard time. She has nowhere to put her things. And I told her that she could keep her stuff here for the time being. And I thought that that was a little weird because they'd been broken up for a while, and it did make me uncomfortable that his ex's stuff was at his house, but I did believe him why the stuff was there. And I did ask that eventually it be moved out because it did make me kind of uncomfortable. But that is all I knew about Sarah and their involvement. All I knew is that they broke up over the summer. So here comes the insane prophecy. If you've heard my story before, you know that this is where things get absolutely crazy. There was a conference at Life Center. So just like I had gotten healed at this Heidi Baker conference back when I was 17, there was going to be a conference at Life Center. And people loved coming to these things because prophets, these people who said that they could hear the word of God, they would come to these conferences. And specifically, there was one. His name is Sean Bowles, which, if you know, you know. And Sean Bowles was known for being extremely prophetic. So he would get these very precise words of knowledge. And if you are not familiar, a word of knowledge is where God will tell you a specific piece of information. So kind of like the treasure hunts that I mentioned in the first episode, where I might see a yellow shirt, but his words of knowledge were next level. So for example, he might get on stage and say, I heard the numbers 572. And he would say, did those numbers mean anything to anybody in this room? And it's all very psychic. And somebody might stand up and say, oh my gosh, that's me. That's my home address. And he would say, oh my goodness, stand up. God has a word for you. And then he would start to give them a prophetic word from God. So he was known to always call out people's phone numbers, their addresses. He would know how many kids they have. He would know their dogs' names. He just knew all of this insane information that the point is, if he knows these details, then you believe that he is really hearing from God. So it is very confirmed that this is a word from the Lord because of all of these confirming details. So at this point, I had stopped working at the diner and I was working at this little cafe called Tomato Pie Cafe, which I had posted about on my Facebook. And it was this little cafe near the bottom of the church. So at the time of the conference, I was not able to attend because I was working at this little hipster place. And Ted was at the conference. So the day before the infamous prophetic word, he had been there and his friend got called out by Sean. And for some reason, his friend was not able to make the conference. He was signed up to be there, which, if you know, you know. Sean Bowles probably looked at the guest list, knew that this guy was supposed to be there, but he wasn't actually in the room. So Ted, being the good friend that he was, ran up to Sean, brought his phone and said, I will call my friend. I'll get him on the phone and you can prophesy over him over the phone. So Sean said, that's great. And he proceeded to give him a prophetic word. So the very next day at the conference, Sean gets on stage and he said, where's that guy that brought me the phone yesterday? I want to give a prophetic word to the guy who brought me the phone. So Ted is so excited. He stands up in the audience and Sean says, so I just saw the number 50 and 50 means Jubilee. And I heard God say that he is giving you Jubilee. Does that mean anything to you? And the audience starts laughing, the people around him, because they know that we are dating at this point. We had only been dating, what was it? I think a month at this point. And everybody is just so excited that God is giving me to Ted. So Ted ended up saying, yes, that's my girlfriend's name. And everybody's laughing. And he ended up calling out where I worked as well, which was crazy. He said, does she have anything to do with Tomato Pie Cafe? And like I said, I worked at Tomato Pie Cafe. So all of a sudden, while I am working at Tomato Pie Cafe, I start getting phone calls from people at this conference saying, oh my gosh, God said that you are supposed to marry your boyfriend. And when I tell you guys that we became famous, we became famous at this conference, people were flooding Tomato Pie Cafe trying to get a glimpse of Jubilee because they just thought that this was the cutest love story and that God said that we are supposed to be together and we are supposed to get married. And at the time, I was so happy because, like I said before, I had always prayed that God would tell me when I had met the person I was supposed to be with. So I was already feeling like, oh, this is so confirmed, so confirmed. He's such a good guy. And then all of a sudden, I have one of the biggest prophets in these circles confirming that God wants me to be with Ted. So I call my parents, I tell them what happened. They think that this is so crazy, but they are happy for me. And from then on out, we were full steam ahead towards engagement. He ended up within, I think, a couple weeks. He flew down to Texas by himself. I wasn't even there. And he stayed with my parents for a couple days. He asked my dad for permission to marry me. And my parents, they just wanted me to be happy. And I told them, listen, this is the guy. This is what I want to do. And so crazy. He asked for their permission. I knew that a proposal was coming. And I was so excited, but I could also not believe that it was happening this quickly because at this time, guys, we had been dating less than 2 months. We are 2 months into this relationship and we are on our way to getting engaged. And there had been no red flags really, other than the Sarah stuff being at his house. So a few days before the proposal, I think it was the day before the proposal, I was talking to him and I asked him if he had ever, or if he does currently, watch porn. And I wasn't asking him this to judge him. Obviously, so many people have lots of different thoughts on porn, very good arguments. And I had asked him, do you watch it? Just because this was a topic in the church. And obviously, if I'm going to marry this guy, I just want to know if he watches it and make sure that we are on the same page because Jubilee now, I just believe every couple do what's best for you, if y'all are wondering how I feel about it. But at the time, I obviously was not about porn. So I just wanted to know where he stood. And he told me that he had never watched it. And there was a look in his eye that I knew he was lying. Like, I was like, what do you mean? Never. I just really did not believe him. So I asked him again, are you sure? Are you sure you don't watch it? And he kept saying no, and he kept getting defensive. So I kept asking because I think most women can relate to just seeing a look in someone's eyes and you kind of know they're not telling you the truth. So he finally admits, he like throws his hands up in the air and he says, okay, fine. Yes, I do watch it and I'm actually addicted to it. And I am in therapy specifically for my porn addiction. And I was so taken aback by this because I could not believe that he had lied to me to my face over and over and over again, and that it took this many times of asking for him to come clean. But on the other hand, I really valued vulnerability. I was very against shame. I didn't want to make him feel shameful. So I said, it really hurts me that you lied to me, but thank you for telling me the truth. Thank you for trusting me. What does this look like for you? What does a porn addiction look like? Is this going to cause problems in our marriage? Let's try to get on the same page. And I was trying my best to not be judgmental because I was afraid that he was going to really just shut down. And I wanted to be a safe place for him to land. But at the same time, I had this sinking feeling in my stomach where I didn't know how well I knew him. And I think that was the first time that I started to spin a bit. But I was taken back to this prophetic word. I was taken back to, well, Sean Bowles says that we are supposed to be together. And there was a lot of church pressure at this point. Like, our video had been posted on YouTube. It has since been privated, but it had been posted on YouTube and it had been shared. So even people from Bethel in California had seen this video, and I felt a lot of pressure to fulfill this prophecy. So this is a couple days before the proposal. I am spinning, but I'm also thinking we are just going to figure this out later on because we are 100% supposed to be together. The timing for a proposal could not have been worse. And he was also starting to fake propose, which this was insane. He would get down on one knee and act like he was about to propose. And then he'd kind of be like, psych. And it really hurt me every time he did this. And I would tell him, hey, this actually isn't funny because I know that you are going to propose soon. I'm really excited about it. And every time you do it, I get so excited. And then I feel like really let down and embarrassed and stupid. And he just kept doing it, guys. And looking back, this is a red flag because I think he did like causing me emotional pain. So he kept fake proposing to the point where the night that he proposed, I kid you not, we went out to a fancy dinner. I was thinking maybe this is the night that he is going to propose. And he fake proposed an hour before he actually proposed. So he just was not respecting what I had asked of him. So at this point, I'm already kind of in a bad mood because he had fake proposed. I had gotten let down, but he told me, can we please go for a walk on the Harrisburg Bridge? Let's go for a walk. It'll be really nice after dinner. And I was like, okay. And what's so funny is I thought, what if he's going to propose on the bridge? I'm in such a bad mood right now. I feel really hurt. I'm really frustrated with him, but I guess I have to go because what if he is about to propose? So I get on the bridge and it was the proposal, the real one. And it was so over the top, guys. So over the top. I thought it was really romantic at the time. He had all of our ministry school friends, or whoever could make it, spaced out throughout the bridge. And they would be on the right side and the left side, all the way down the line. And when I went to each person, they gave me a rose and they told me a Disney quote because I was such a Disney adult. I loved Disney at this point, which I still do, but not to the level I did back then. And people started to tell me a Disney quote and give me a rose. And as I made my way down, I ended up having a full bouquet of roses. And he had hired a ministry school student from a fellow ministry school to come and play Thinking Out Loud by Ed Sheeran. So there's this guitar player on the bridge and he's playing the song of the year that everybody was dancing to. And he got down on one knee. And guys, it's so cringe even looking back on it, but it's fine. He said, you taught me that dreams don't have to end at midnight, referencing Cinderella, and said, will you try on this glass ring? So he didn't even say, will you marry me? He just said, will you try on this glass ring? And I was like, okay, yes, I do, or I will. And he put the ring on my finger. And the second that he stood up and we kissed, fireworks went off. And I wish you guys could have seen it because this felt like something straight out of a rom-com. I could not have asked for a better proposal at the time because the second we kissed, fireworks went off. And it turns out it was from a stadium not too far away. And Ted had not planned this. Or at least that's what I was told. At this point, I have no idea what was real or not real with Ted. Maybe he did time it exactly perfectly to when the game was going to end, but I thought that this was just another sign from God that we were supposed to be together and that God was blessing my engagement. So we called our families, we told them that we were getting married, and at this point we had been together for 2 months and 10 days. Which, looking back, oh my gosh, I have food in my fridge that has been there longer than that. But I really believed when you know, and that we were just going to work out all of the details later. Little did I know I was about to start seeing some major red flags. So these red flags did not show up until after we got engaged, but I'm just going to take you guys through a list of red flags that came up throughout our engagement. So I wrote them down because there's so many. First red flag, I found out that his parents paid for my ring, which was interesting. It's not the biggest red flag, but it did kind of bum me out when I found out that his parents had paid for it. The second red flag was there was a time where I was at the Smith's house and there was this mutual friend there that I knew that Ted didn't like. So I knew that they were not super close, but the topic of Ted came up and this mutual friend said in a blunt way, well, have you ever seen Ted mad? And I had not seen Ted mad at that point. Not really. Maybe like a little disagreement, but not mad. And he said, you don't want to see him mad. And I thought maybe it was just this guy talking bad about Ted. And should I have looked into that more? 100%. But I had only seen what I had seen. And I didn't think that this guy was super credible. So I tried to just push that down, which was obviously not the right decision. Another red flag was that, remember how he took me to the Harrisburg Bridge and he had said a friend had taken him there and they had a very good moment there and that this was one of his best friends. So during our engagement, Ted ended up calling me in the middle of the night, and he was hiccup crying, and he was saying that he needed me. So I went out to his house, and I did not know what was going on. He was being very vague, and he ended up telling me that this friend told him that he didn't want to be friends with him anymore. So there was this friendship breakup, and I kept asking, why? What happened? Why doesn't he want to be your friend? What's going on? And Ted would not give me a straight answer. And he just kept crying and crying, and I could not get him literally ever to give me the full story. All I did end up getting was he said that they had had a disagreement about politics, and the friend did not like how he reacted during this argument. Now, in hindsight, I think I know how Ted was probably reacting. He probably got pretty scary, and this friend decided to end the friendship. But at the time, I was just trying to comfort him. I felt really bad that his friend had ditched him, and I thought that I needed to comfort him through his friendship grief. Now we are down to the big 3 red flags, the one where you guys are going to scream at me and tell me, Jubilee, why why did you marry this guy? Okay. So there was a time where I was in his apartment. It was probably a month after we got engaged, and he was in the shower and I was laying on his bed. And it wasn't like that. Okay. We were waiting till marriage and everything, but I was laying on his bed while he was taking a shower. And all of a sudden I hear these crazy noises coming from the shower. And I don't really know how to describe it. It sounded like video game noises. It was, I don't even know how to describe it, but it scared me because I had no idea what he was doing. And it was really, really loud. And in that moment, my stomach sank. And I had this thought that I felt like I did not know who he was. And I felt like I was in an apartment with a stranger, despite the fact that this man was my fiance. And I really realized, where's he been the last 10 years? During this time, I started to think, wow, he's 30, I'm 20. Where's he been? Like, what is his history? And I think it really just shows my age because I didn't know the questions to ask. I wasn't really asking him about his history. I wasn't asking him about how much money he had, if he was in debt. He was literally working part-time at the church as a janitor. And for some reason, I just thought, well, we'll make it work. And that was the big red flag, was when I started to notice that he would talk to himself a lot. So he comes out of the shower and I asked him, hey, what were you doing? And he told me that he liked to imagine himself in movies, and or also that he was wrestling. He said, I have a very vivid imagination, so sometimes I act these things out. And as our relationship went on, this became a bigger and bigger deal throughout our relationship, but he would talk to himself a lot. And I really don't want to make light of any mental illness, so that please hear my heart. That is not what I am trying to do, but I do want to just highlight the fact that there was a lot going on with Ted that I was not aware of, and I'm going to get more into that later, but these were some red flags that I missed. He would talk to himself a lot, and while he did this, it would be in public. While we were in parking lots, he would start swinging his arms, and he would look really angry when he was talking to himself. And whenever I questioned it, I would say, hey, what are you doing? He would snap at me and tell me that Albert Einstein talked to himself and he was a genius, and he would kind of lump himself in with geniuses, and he would say, I'm just like so smart and so talented, you just don't understand me. So that was the first big red flag. Second big red flag was that he told me that he was going to own the entire company of Disney, which I love to poke fun about this on social media. I'm sure you guys have heard this a million times, but he genuinely thought that he was going to own Disney. And when I tell you he did not mean be the CEO of Disney, he meant I am going to own the entire company, which is not even a thing. You can't even do that. But he said that he was going to. And I just thought, we love a dreamer. We love a dreamer. So I tried to just shove my doubts about that away. The third big red flag is that Ted thought that he was never, ever going to die. Ever, ever, ever. He thought that he was going to live to be hundreds of years old. Which I'm sure any sane person who is not involved in these religious circles is, banging their head on the wall thinking, Jubilee, wake up. What were you doing with this guy? But at Bethel, they, like I said, always believed that it was God's will to heal. They thought that 100% of the time, God wants to heal the sick. So Ted's explanation was that if God always wants to heal, then why would I ever die? I am going to live forever. And I would tell him, well, nobody ever has. So I would try to reset his expectations. And he said, well, nobody has had as much faith as me. And I am going to be the first. So I'm just going to let you guys sit with that for a second because at the time, this caused me so much anxiety. I remember I would tell him, well, what happens if you do die? And he said, Jubilee, you are going to raise me from the dead. And I know that it sounds so silly, but this brought me so much anxiety throughout our marriage because I already am just naturally an anxious person. I had fears about him getting in a car accident and dying and just general anxiety. And to put on top of that if he were to ever pass away in some tragic accident, he believed that I was going to raise him from the dead. And I knew that I was not going to raise him from the dead, that my prayers would not bring him back to life. And then I would have to grieve and feel guilty that I did not raise him from the dead, which these are such weird thoughts and arguments to have. But this is a very real talk that happened between me and Ted often in our marriage. So those were my 3 big red flags during our engagement, but I was just drawn back to this prophetic word. I thought that this was God's will for my life, and I decided to keep going. While I was still going forward with this wedding and just decided to ignore every red flag, my body was not letting me get away with this easily. So during this time, I ended up developing fibromyalgia, which, if you don't know, this is just chronic pain. So I had so much pain, I was not able to sleep through the night anymore. I was waking up multiple times every single night. And my body was so disrupted. When I tell you, I just had stabbing pains in my hands, my legs, and I had such chronic fatigue during our engagement, and it came out of nowhere. I had always been a very healthy person, and all of a sudden I could not walk through the grocery store for more than 10 minutes without needing to take a seat. And my health deteriorated so quickly. And I had no idea what was going on with me. I went to functional medicine doctors. I got on a bunch of supplements. I did different diets to try to heal my fibromyalgia. And all of my blood work was coming back normal. And that's why they ended up diagnosing me with fibromyalgia, because it was kind of unexplained. But looking back, and I'm definitely going to get more into this later. Looking back, I really do believe that my body was kicking and screaming at me to not marry this man, that something was deeply, deeply wrong, and that I needed to call off the wedding. But I was also still being love bombed at this point. Obviously, we had our little disagreements about him living forever. But other than that, we didn't really fight. We were really still in the honeymoon phase. Obviously, we are 6 months into this relationship, so we were still in the honeymoon phase. And during the summer, our plan was to move back to Texas. We were going to get married and we were going to live in Texas. So I moved back to Texas for the summer, and he ended up staying throughout the summer in Harrisburg. So we had a long distance situation during our engagement for just a couple months. And during this time, we were still in decent communication, but I did notice that there were hours where he would kind of disappear a little bit and I wouldn't hear from him for a while. And remember that, because that is going to come back around. But I didn't think much of it. Obviously, I just think that this guy is so pure. He's so amazing. He's probably out doing ministry or whatever. So like I said, I got back to Texas. I'm planning this wedding, and we decided that we were going to get married in Denver because this was going to be a destination wedding because his family lived really north and I was in Texas. And we decided that we were going to get married in the middle in Denver. So I am trying to plan this wedding. I have fibromyalgia. I'm trying to plan the wedding from another state, which was such a nightmare, and weddings are so expensive. But overall, I was feeling really happy with our relationship. I really thought that this was still from God, and I was kind of still living in La La Land. So he ended up coming to Texas. He moved. He got an apartment. We got everything set up. And this is when I encountered my first abusive situation with Ted. And I do want to give a trigger warning because it really just gets kind of heavy from here. So it was a week before the wedding, and we were having an argument. I don't remember what it was about. I was in the parking lot of his apartment, and I was in my car, and he was standing outside by my car door, and he started screaming at me. And I'd never seen this side of him before. We're just in the middle of arguing in normal tones. And then all of a sudden he took his arm and he slammed it on the top of my car. And he said, "Fuck you, you fucking bitch." And I was so taken aback by him speaking to me this way. I had never seen him angry. I had never been spoken to that way by a man. And I just panicked. I ended up driving away. I think he kind of walked to the side, or maybe he stormed off. It's all kind of blurry, but through tears, I drive to a Best Buy parking lot. And I just remember thinking, who is this guy? What am I supposed to do? It's a week before the wedding, and I've never seen this side of him. I've never had somebody treat me this way before. And one thing that's so interesting is that a lot of these churches growing up, they would have us write down what we want in a future spouse. They would say, ask God for everything that you want in a partner. And the one thing, funny enough, that I had always asked from God was that I would find somebody who was not an angry person, because I did not do well with anger. I would shut down and I would get really scared. And I just wanted somebody who wasn't angry. So here I am a week before the wedding, and he cussed at me and really terrified me. And I ended up calling our pastor friend, who he wasn't like our pastor. He had a church out in Harrisburg, and we had asked him if he would officiate our wedding, and he was going to come out to Colorado in a week. And I called our friend and I told him what happened. And I said, he cussed at me. He hit my car, and just through sobs, I'm asking him, what do I do? And this pastor, I want to give him his props, because I think a lot of people would really try to, just diminish this incident. But he actually told me that he thought that maybe we should call off the wedding, and that we should get in therapy, and that maybe we should not get married. And what's crazy is that it had the exact opposite reaction in me. So as he's telling me, maybe you guys should not get married, I started to feel this panic. I felt the panic of, my parents have spent so much money on this wedding. Everybody has booked their flights. My bridesmaids have gotten their dresses. His parents, are coming from Colorado. They have always wanted him to get married. I feel all of this pressure. I'm thinking about the prophetic word. I'm thinking about the fact that I know that God wants us to be together. So if we're going to get married, and I know that this is God's will, then I need to get married now, because we already paid for it, and I can't disappoint people. The flights are already booked. And I just felt this level of panic rise up in me. And I started to tell him, no, it's going to be fine. Like it was partially me. I didn't handle it the best either. We're going to be okay. And I felt like I needed to convince this pastor to agree to marry us. So I started to really try to diminish it. And our pastor friend felt really uncomfortable with us getting married. But I begged him to still marry us, and he did. So we ended up going through with the wedding, and there were some other crazy things that happened, like total side tangent, but he had a groomsman who I never really liked this guy. He gave me a bad vibe. And this groomsman's wife texted Ted the week or like literally probably the day before the wedding and said, hey, the groomsman is abusive to me. He's terrible. He calls me Jezebel. I believe that he is filled with demons. He is a demonic spirit. Do not let him touch you on your wedding day. And it was just this really weird warning from this woman who was saying that she had been abused by this groomsman, and that he had evil spirits. And Ted told me that she was crazy, that she was crazy to not listen to her, and that his friend was wonderful. And I didn't know what to do. And this friend was not in our life very often. He lived in Harrisburg, and I knew that he wasn't going to be a part of our life going forward. So I felt like I just needed to drop it. So I did. So that was just a little weird thing that had happened. And we went through with the wedding. It went really well. Honestly, it felt like the happiest day of my life at the time. I did start to feel peace, and I felt like I was in God's will. And I truly felt that we were going to make it work. That hopefully this outburst from Ted was just a blip, and maybe it was just the stress of the wedding, the stress of trying to plan everything. And I hoped that the worst was behind me. Little did I know some of the chaos was going to continue, unfortunately, on the honeymoon. So while we are on the honeymoon, we ended up going to Disney World for the honeymoon, which was my dream. I had always wanted that. So we went, and the first few days were great. Everything was going well. And I got a text from my mom, and she ended up telling me that my grandpa was in the hospital and that he was really, really sick, had a bad infection, and the doctors weren't sure that he was going to make it. So obviously I am distraught. I am being told that maybe my grandpa is going to die on my honeymoon and that I may not be there to say goodbye. So I am feeling very conflicted, very heartbroken, but I am still trying to be present, obviously, on the honeymoon. So I was not staring at my phone all of the time, but obviously every 5-6 hours, I was sending a text to my mom and saying like, how's grandpa doing? And I had expressed to Ted that I was worried about him, obviously, as anybody would. So there was a time where Ted ended up going in to Trader Joe's to go get us some groceries for the week. And I was in the car on the phone with my mom getting an update. And I got off the phone. Ted got in the car, and I started to tell him how concerned I was about my grandpa. And Ted lost it. He started to yell at me and tell me that my family had no respect for us or our marriage, and how dare they call us on the honeymoon to tell us bad news, and that I should not be thinking about this on the honeymoon, and that I got married to him, and per the Bible, I left my family behind, and Ted was my family now, and that it was inappropriate for me to be thinking about this on the honeymoon. And that was the first time that this big tension between us versus your family. And my family was the enemy, and Ted wanted all of me. He wanted to know that I made him the priority in my life. So We get back from the honeymoon and this continued on. I think it was maybe the week after we got back. He ended up telling me that I was not allowed to go out to eat with my dad anymore, which I didn't go out to eat with my dad super often, but we did have a thing where maybe once a month we would go out to eat, go out to dinner. And this is just something that we had done since we were 13. We have a great relationship to this day. And Ted told me that I was no longer allowed to go out to eat with my dad anymore because it was inappropriate. Because I am married now. Ted is now the man in my life, and I left my family behind per the Bible, and it would be inappropriate for me to go out to eat with my own father. And this is when I really started to push back because I obviously thought that that was wrong. I thought that that was a crazy thing to ask of me. And I told him, I mean, I'm not going to stop going out to eat with my dad. So this was a constant argument between us for maybe like a week. And then we had reached out to some mutual friends and we got this advice to create a compromise. So the compromise was that I would no longer go out to dinner with my dad, but I was allowed to go out to lunch with my dad occasionally, as long as Ted was at work. And that it wouldn't be taking time away from our marriage. And at this time, I am being told that this is a normal solution, that I should be trying to find a compromise with my husband. So this was just another way that he was continuing to isolate me. So very quickly, things turned verbally abusive, physically abusive. There was a time when we were in our apartment and he told me that I was such a victim, just like everybody else in my family. He would find the worst and meanest things that he could possibly think to say. He would mock me for the sexual abuse that I had experienced as a child. And he would say, you know, you're such a victim if I ever got sad or if I was ever struggling with those thoughts. And there was a time where during an argument, he ended up lunging at me and acting like he was going to hit me, but he didn't actually hit me. He just kind of lunged to scare me, and it worked. I was very scared, so I ended up running out of this apartment, our apartment, and I had no shoes on. I am running through the parking lot. I'm hiding behind cars. He's chasing after me in the dead of night, and that was the first moment when I realized, like, how is this my life? How am I that girl who is running in the middle of the night because I am afraid that my husband is going to hurt me? And it all still felt in the gray area enough because at this point I did not have bruises. I was just being threatened with violence, and I didn't feel like I could leave him. So that night I ended up going home to my mom's house, and I didn't tell her the truth. I told her that we got into an argument and I just needed some space. And given what my mom knew at the time, she was trying to give me the best advice that she could think of in a normal situation. So she told me that she thought that I should go home. Because in her mind, she is thinking, well, you're married now. You can't run home every time something bad happens. You guys have to communicate. You have to talk about it. And I was not giving her the full picture. So I went home and I felt like, okay, I have to stay. I have to work this out. We have to talk through these things. But very quickly, I started to feel like we were on the verge of divorce. And we had only been married for like 3 months at this point. And we ended up going on a retreat to this little Christian wilderness place. We went for the weekend just to try to reconnect because I really felt like we were on the verge of divorce and I didn't even know how we had gotten here. I would cry to him and tell him, which this is so funny because he's my abuser, but at the same time, I'm confiding in him about how his abuse is hurting me. And I would say, you know, I'm so afraid that you're going to hurt me. And he's kind of telling me, how could you ever think that I would hurt you? Of course I would never hurt you. So then I started to feel crazy. Am I being dramatic? Am I just an anxious person? He's saying that he would never hurt me, but it feels like he would hurt me the way that he's speaking to me, the way that he's chasing me, the way that he's lunging at me, but he is looking me in the eye and saying, how could you ever think that I would hurt you? And I just felt like I was in this crazy loop where I did not know what I was going through at the time. And when you're in these religious systems, one thing that is so common is the need to protect your spouse. You are told that you need to make them look good. You should not air your dirty laundry, that you guys are on a team. So you don't throw somebody who is on your team under the bus. That would be wrong. And also, your family would never look at them the same way ever again. So I was really raised to believe that I needed to protect Ted's image. So I was not telling anybody what was going on at this point. I was really keeping everything to myself because I didn't really know what I was dealing with, but I didn't believe in divorce. I did believe that no matter what, we were going to make this work to the point where I was like, if I'm miserable for the rest of my life, I will suffer because I am not getting divorced. And I was so stubborn about it. So stubborn about it. And actually, that reminds me, I want to read what I wrote in my journal later on when I finally did leave, because it just shows how stubborn I was. But at this point, I am deciding to stay, but the abuse is really starting to ramp up. He started to call me a whore, which obviously, like I said before, it just felt like he flipped a switch, because in the beginning, he told me he didn't judge me for my past sin. And all of a sudden, he is calling me these really awful names, and he's telling me how dirty I am and really holding my past against me. He started to tell me that Alyssa, the second-year pastor from Bethel, was right about me. She was so right about you. You are so horrible and dirty, and you're a whore. And there was one time, and I've never shared this before because it's so, I think it really shows how deeply I held purity culture to me and how much purity culture was just such a constant thought in my mind. He is standing over me. He's screaming at me. He's telling me I'm all of these bad, awful things. And at one point, I don't remember if it was this day, but he did start to call me Jezebel as well, which is a Christian kind of diss. It's the worst thing that you can say about a woman. And I ended up running to our closet, and in a frenzy, I feel like I was losing my mind, guys. I ran to my closet in a frenzy, and I grabbed my lingerie that I had worn on our wedding night. And it was this pure white lingerie. And obviously it's supposed to represent our purity and our covenant. And I took this lingerie and I literally ripped it. I shredded it, and he starts grabbing it out of my hands. He's like, what are you doing? He's acting like I'm totally crazy. And I'm through sobs. I'm panicking. I feel like I'm having a panic attack. And I just said, well, I'm a whore. And I felt like I was losing my mind. I felt like I didn't deserve to have this pure white lingerie. I felt like, why should I keep this if you obviously think I'm so disgusting? And it felt like I was just ripping apart my dreams and what I thought that I had at the time. And literally for the rest of our marriage, I ended up keeping it, which is so sad because I had this ripped lingerie that I had like kind of tied into a ball, and I kept it because I felt like I couldn't get rid of it because, you know, obviously it was my wedding night lingerie, but at the same time, it's all ripped and shredded because I had ripped it during this really traumatic episode that I had been through. And things were just really dark. So I was even starting to feel kind of suicidal. So I had started to go to therapy. And while I was in therapy, I was not being honest with this woman at all. I was not telling her what was going on in my marriage. I was just telling her about my fibromyalgia. I was telling her that I wasn't feeling really well and I was feeling discouraged in life. And I would sometimes vaguely reference arguments that we would have, but I would always really water them down and try to make him look as good as possible. But there was one time I shared an argument with her that was so tame. Like, he brought a chair. It's a long story, but I shared this argument with her, and she ended up telling me that she thought that he sounded controlling and that he might be abusive. And I was shocked that she said that because I thought I was sharing with her the tamest story of all time. And I ended up leaving therapy and I told him what she said. And I don't know why I did that. I think maybe I did because I was hoping that maybe if he heard someone else say, hey, the way that you're acting is not okay. Hey, somebody else thinks that this is inappropriate. Maybe it could get through to him. But when I told him what she said, he told me that I was no longer allowed to go to therapy. So from then on out, throughout our entire marriage, I was no longer allowed to seek therapy because he told me that a therapist would just hear my side of the story. And if all I'm going to do is go to a therapist and talk bad about him, that he was not going to pay for it. And there was a lot of levels of financial abuse throughout our marriage as well. He had full control of our finances. He had access to all of the bank accounts that I did not have access to. And he just told me, well, I'm not going to pay for you to talk bad about me. So that was the end of my therapy. And during this time, some other crazy things started to happen. He was a substitute teacher here in Texas, and that's just kind of what he was doing in the meantime. He was really still wanting to get into film, although we had no idea how we were going to do that. And there was one time where I noticed that he had lied about going to work. So he said that he had a substitute job. He got all dressed up. He left the house at like 7 a.m. and he came home at 5 something. And I saw on the portal that he didn't have a job that day, that he had not actually subbed that day. So I brought it up to him and he ended up admitting that he had gotten dressed and gone somewhere. I don't even know where he was. I have my theories, as I will share later on, but I started to realize that he was lying about going to work, and he was really relying on his parents to fund our life at this point because I was really sick. I was just working part-time and he didn't really want me to work, which was another funny thing. We were really broke, but he didn't want me to work because I think he wanted to have a hold over me. He didn't want me to have independence. So he would have his parents fund a lot of our lives at that point, but I never knew how much because I didn't have access to our bank accounts. All I knew is that he was taking care of us, and really his parents were taking care of us. That is what was going on at the time. And a little bit of the backstory there was his parents had adopted him from birth, and they had had a stillborn before they adopted him. They loved me. They told me that I was the daughter that they always wanted. So in my mind, I just had I felt like I had a responsibility to stay as well, because his mom would say, you're the daughter that I lost and that I always wanted. And I didn't feel like I could leave his mom. So that is a whole other tangent, but they were genuinely good people and they were very, very good to me. And I think that he had been taking advantage of them for a long time. I never really knew how much because I was not really let in on that aspect of life. We ended up getting into an argument that changed the entire course of my life. And this happened while we were at my parents' house. We had actually been living with them for a couple months. I forgot why, but we were living with them for a couple months, and he ended up lunging at me and he pinned me down and he spit in my face. And then he ended up taking my jacket that was on the bed and he hit me with this jacket. So I'm crying and feeling like, wait, is this actually abuse now? Because I think I kept playing in my head, am I in an abusive relationship? And it hadn't really turned super physical at that point. And I was panicking because I felt like, oh, so is this physical abuse? And if it is, am I allowed to get divorced? Because in the church, I was always told divorce is not an option unless you are in a physically abusive relationship. So when this happened, I thought, oh my gosh, this is physically abusive. am I going to have to get divorced now? So we called his friends, and they were kind of our spiritual mentors, I guess you would say. So we ended up calling them, and I told them what happened. And I told them how he had hit me with this jacket. And he kept defending himself and saying, I didn't hit you. The jacket hit you. And I was just doing mental gymnastics. Like, what do you mean? No, like you hit me. And he would say, no, my hand didn't hit you. The jacket hit you. And I am just feeling so gaslit and like I'm going crazy. And these friends ended up giving us the most insane advice. So they told us that we should move to Atlanta. During the middle of this argument, we are coming to them saying, we are on the brink of divorce. We don't know what we are doing. And they said that we should move to Atlanta because Atlanta has a thriving film industry. And that if we moved there, Ted would feel better about himself because right now Ted is very unhappy. He doesn't like your family. Your family is coming between you guys, and that's causing tension. And Ted doesn't feel good about his career, and Ted wants to own Disney, and he is never going to accomplish his dreams if you guys are living in Texas. So you guys should move to Atlanta, focus on your marriage, and let Ted chase his dreams. And if he starts to feel good about himself, then maybe he will be nicer to you. So call me crazy, guys, but I packed up my life and I moved to Atlanta. And this just further isolated me, obviously, because now I don't have the support of my family. But I was willing to do anything at this point to make my marriage work. I just wanted to prove to Ted that I was prioritizing him. I thought, okay, if I leave my family behind for real this time, maybe he will finally realize that he is my priority and he will stop feeling so threatened by my family. So within 2 months, we moved off to Atlanta. We had no jobs lined up. He had signed up to Uber, so he was going to Uber, and we decided that we were going to become background actors. And this was mostly just to get our foot in the door. So we had heard that the best way to get involved in these sorts of productions is just to get on the set and market with people, make a lot of friends. It's all about connections. And we decided that that was going to be our ticket in. And I was not caring about this at all, guys. I was not trying to work in film or anything, but we did decide that we were gonna go for it. So I started doing background acting, and I did that for a few years. And I loved it. So this whole sector, I know things were pretty grim in San Antonio. I know that section was really heavy. So I'm sorry if that was a little too heavy, but I do want to be real about the truth of what it looks like to be in a domestic violence relationship. But once we moved to Atlanta, things did get better for a good amount of time. So for example, whereas in Texas, he was being abusive and nasty to me almost every day, when we moved to Atlanta, he would have like a few weeks at a time where he'd kind of keep it together. He wouldn't call me names. He wouldn't be abusive, but then he would have these crazy bursts where he would just lose it and be abusive. So at this point, I'm doing background acting. I'm falling in love with it. I'm on these sets. I'm seeing these celebrities that I grew up idolizing, and I am living what feels like my best life. I am enjoying it a lot. I got to be a background actor on Marvel movies and The Walking Dead, and it felt like maybe we had turned a corner. Maybe we were going to finally hit our stride as a married couple, and I started to really convince myself that we could move on from this and that actually maybe I love my marriage and maybe I love my life, which sounds crazy. But when you're having a good few weeks, I really felt like, wow, okay, things are getting better, but there was always a situation that was just around the corner. And that was the really hard thing with Ted is I never knew if it was dumb to be hopeful. And while things were going well on the relationship front, kind of, I still had fibromyalgia, so I was still really struggling. But background work was really nice because I was able to be in extras holding, which is basically like the break area. You would stay there whenever they're not needing you on set. And sometimes you would be in there the majority of the day. And sometimes some of the background gigs would be coffee shop gigs. So you might be sitting the entire day and just pretending like you're drinking coffee. So it was a very good job for somebody who had chronic pain, for the most part. Obviously, there were some that were really hard where you're on your feet all the time, but it was a nice job for me for the most part. And I was starting to make friends outside of TED. And this is where I really started to find myself. I started to make friends outside of this culty sector. I started to read a bunch of self-help books. And I feel like this is when I started to become kind of who I am today. But despite all of the things that were going right in my life, there was always just something darker lurking in the back. So that is where I'm going to end it for this week of Healedish. I know that this is a long story, but I really just want to give you guys the full picture of what happened. And I think for me personally, it is so important to share details when it comes to domestic violence. And the reason being is I always thought that abuse had to look like one specific thing. I thought that abuse looked like bruises, it looked like hitting, it looked like putting makeup on to cover up what your partner had done to you. And there were so many subtle forms of abuse and psychological abuse with my relationship with Ted. And I think that had I known the warning signs to look for, I would have been able to get help sooner, because I can't tell you how many times I Googled, is it normal if your husband blank? How many times I would go on Reddit and say, is it normal that my husband cut my hand with keys because he wouldn't let me leave the house? Is it normal that he locked me out of the house? And I think that it is important to share these detailed stories, because I hope that if there is somebody out there who isn't sure what they are dealing with, that maybe you would see yourself in my story, and I can affirm to you that what you are going through is not okay. So that is just my little tangent for the end of this episode. So next week, I'm going to come back with the craziness that follows, which if you have seen my videos, you know I got divorced over a Walt Disney World burger. That is an absolutely crazy story. I ended up finding out that Ted was living a complete double life and that I did not know this man, which is absolutely crazy. I got reached out to by his new girlfriend, who he ended up dating after we got divorced. And the stories that she told me just blew my mind. And I really want to get into all of that, as well as my healing journey and my deconstruction, and my now husband, who I ended up meeting and who has just completely healed my heart. Next week, I'm going to be telling you guys the rest of this crazy story. But for now, it would mean a lot to me if you guys would subscribe, leave a review, or share it with somebody who might need it. See you guys next week for another episode of Healedish.